So I am going to welcome everyone. And at the moment, everyone should be muted. I think I just muted everybody. And I'm going to unmute our speakers as they're here so that, and if you do not see that you're mute, you could mute yourself. It looks like for some reason not everyone is muted. Unmuting, but if you could unmute that, if you could mute yourself, if you're not, that would be great. That way we can make sure that everybody can hear the speaker. I'm Linda Braun, and I'm the CE consultant for YALSA, and happy to have you here at our session on cultural competency and responsiveness. And today we're fortunate enough to have Licia from who works with NCWIT. I'm actually going to go to the next slide. Maybe. Please move my slides. Here we go. I'm going to go to this slide. I'll come back to this one in a second. With Licia Barker from National Center for Women and Information Technology. She's going to be talking with us about computational thinking and reaching girls in particular, and the kinds of work libraries can do in order to support cultural competency and responsiveness through computer science and computational thinking literacies. We also have Cheryl Eberly here from the Santa Ana Public Library, who's going to be talking about some of what she's been doing with cultural competency and also through the work she does with youth in general in her community. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you haven't been in one of our Zoom rooms before, chats, meetings before, you will see that there's a chat at the bottom of the screen. If it's connected to your screen and you want to pop it out so you can move it around, you can click on the arrow in the left, top left, and pop it into the chat so you can move it around. Also, if you can make sure not to unmute yourself, if by mistake you do that, you should be able to highlight your name and then mute. That would be great because we do want to make sure everybody gets to hear everything. And I think that's it. So I'm going to get us started by going back to that previous screen. For some reason, my P doesn't work. But I want to just make sure people realize some different things you can do as we go through the session here today. You can raise a question in a chat if you would like. I'm going to be keeping track of questions and making sure that they get answered as much as we have time for. Take notes whenever you have something that you want to remember. And then at the end, there are some resources, but you can definitely go back to the NCWIT website and learn more about all that we'll be talking about today. So with that, I'm going to go one more slide in, and Licia, you are on. Oops, and let me unmute you if you are muted. Did you unmute yourself?
I believe, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Could you talk a little bit louder?
Yes, I can talk louder. Is that better?
Yeah, I think so. Is that okay with everybody? Can you hear Licia okay? Yes, good. All right.
Okay, thank you. I'm really excited to be speaking to you as a group. I don't know if I know any of you. I did teach at the University of Texas Information for 8 years, and so I worked with a lot of librarians. Sorry, I'm a little distracted because somebody needs, could somebody mute? Could everyone mute, please?
I'm sorry, Licia. I am trying to make sure everyone is muted. If you have unmuted yourself by mistake, to do that. I keep muting people, and it seems like you're unmuting. So there, I think that's better. Did we get it?
Well, hopefully, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, I'm going to talk about the social influences that affect youth's choices to study computing And then how libraries can support reform through strategically recruiting girls into their programs. And as always, I will ask you to evaluate your efforts and to share your ideas with everyone. With some of the information that I'm going to present here today, I'm going to go through it really quickly, but you're going to have access to the slides and to the video, which is being recorded, I believe. I see a little sign that says recording. So yes, so you can come back to it and use things that I'm going to go quickly over are lots and lots of ideas and some statistics. So if we can go down to slide 5.
Oh, sorry. Here I come.
It's okay. First, so I'm going to talk about diversity in computing very quickly. And one of the reasons that I'm going to talk to you about this is because you may need to persuade different audiences about the diversity, the importance of diversity in computing. On the left side of your screen are reasons that I think are often important to librarians. Librarians are very, very deeply concerned with social justice and making sure that everyone has access to information and to anything they need to make their lives better. So you may know that computing related jobs have high entry-level salaries. There's lots and lots of jobs. So we need to make sure that everyone has access to those things. Also, when you have diversity in computing, we have better representation of the user base. So you may know that when speech recognition was first introduced, it did not recognize women's voices. And the reason for that was because the development team did not have women on it. And so they didn't even think, oh, there's other kinds of voices around. On the right side of this slide are arguments that are important to all of us for economic security for the nation, but also if you have business leaders or parents who are deeply concerned with making sure that their kids get jobs, they'll need to understand these things. So there's quite a bit of research that suggests that when you have diverse groups, teams working on problems, that innovation is improved. And as a result, the bottom line, the profitability of a company is improved. Also, of course, we need to have more employees. You'll see that when I talk about demand shortly, which is right now, if you look, or no, yeah, the next slide, please. So this slide, I'm just going to show really closely. Actually, why don't we go down 2 slides? Right, and then here I'm comparing, I'm comparing the number of students who intend to major in computing. If you go up to the pie charts, to the demand in industry for computing. So what you'll see here is that students' intentions to major in computing related disciplines isn't even close to being able to fulfill the demand. And this is one of the slides that I'm going to let you look at independently. If you go down a slide, please. I'm also showing you the different patterns of intentions to major among men and women by the time they get to the college. This is intention to major, but if you go down one more slide, you can see that this pretty much plays out in the end with women often majoring in fields like biology, but rarely majoring in some of the other fields that are very heavily dominated by men. So if you go down one more slide, and again, I'm going to let you examine those slides on your own, and some of them are annotated, so you can see what I have to say about them in the notes page. So how does this happen? Well, we're all influenced by society, by the media, by our families, by our teachers, counselors, librarians, and all of these people who influence us communicate beliefs about careers and about who's capable of doing these different kinds of careers. So These perceptions are shared in explicit and tacit ways and shared down into youth. Parents also communicate gender schemas. So the parents' desires for kids that I'm showing you here, with the sons planning for future responsibilities, daughters being happy, I want you to be clear that it's not that parents don't want their sons to be happy or their daughters to earn a living, but rather this is a ranking. So when they're asked what's important to their kids, they rank income more highly important for sons and happiness more highly important for their daughters. In a study, families expected their sons to finish what they had begun and to persevere for the sake of their future family responsibilities, but they were concerned that their daughters be happy in what they choose to do. This is, I'm sure that some people will disagree with me, but this is inconsistent with what women need to do in their lives today. We need to work, or at least I do. I would be homeless without a job. This kind of stereotyping is reinforced, it's repeated in school, at home, in the media. You still hear stories about counselors or professors saying to people, well, you know, I don't think that women belong in this field, or you don't want to do that. This is the kind of thing that men do. You hear all sorts of stories like that still, even though it's 2018. And it's important to point out that kids really understand expected gender roles and behaviors by the time they're 10 years old. So if we go down one slide, please. Once these beliefs are embedded in us through culture, society, family, they're very difficult to destroy. Thank you. These are very subtle and pervasive messages. They become very deep-seated in us and turn into something called unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is just our beliefs about what kinds of people do what kinds of things in the world. And they become transparent. It's like a fish in water. It just seems like the natural order of things. Also, as humans, we suffer from something called confirmation bias. So we seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. Maybe you watch Fox News, maybe you watch ABC News, but these tend to have different political biases, and we know that some people are more likely to watch Fox than ABC because it is consistent with their existing political positions. So confirmation bias is this notion that when people search for new information, the information is biased in favor of previously held beliefs, expectations, or desired conclusions. And this is also affects the choices that youth make, the choices that their parents or their grandparents make for them. It's not about truth, it's just about belief systems. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So when we talk about differences in course taking and pursuit of careers that result in those majors that I showed you earlier, we have to think about identity and how occupation is so closely linked to our identities, and it's not just about interest. It's important to talk about these things because many times people will say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the slide that says, how do we explain differences? So I think it's up one. Right. So to try to explain why we have so many women in biology and so few women in computer science, we have to think about how their choices are shaped by their identities, their beliefs about who they are. Many times you probably hear people say things like, well, girls just aren't interested in the computing. It's not enough to look at interest. Interest is not unidimensional, but it's a combination of things, including self-efficacy, which is something I'll talk about in a few minutes. And so now we can go down a slide to the boys are more likely. So for a number of reasons, boys are more likely to take CS course, computer science courses and pursue computing related careers. They're more likely, so the research shows they're more likely to be steered toward occupations that are high paying and steady. They're more likely to be encouraged for their mathematics skills than our girls. You may hear girls say, you may be one of these people yourselves, I know I was, saying, well, I really like math, but I don't know what to do with it. Somehow boys end up in careers where mathematics is more prevalent, like engineering careers, than do girls. Although, by the way, for your interest, about half of math majors are women. And also, boys desire to live up to the stereotypes that boys are supposed to be good at technology. So they want to perform a high status masculine role. But
yes. You need it? I just want to see what kind of
for girls, this is...
the voices? Mm-hmm.
Sorry. We have stereotypes that girls are not technological. So if we can go down one slide, please. So it's the green one. Libraries can help to diversify computing. So in case you were wondering, okay, what can I do about it? We have ideas, and I think that you probably do too. And I hope that you will share your ideas. What I'm going to talk to you is based on social cognitive career theory, thinking about how people enter careers and what kinds of activities and behaviors and beliefs lead them to certain careers. So I'm going to give you an overview of thinking about how you identify target audiences, and then a really big chunk of the next part of my conversation with you is messaging for interest, competence, belonging, and identity. So if you remember nothing else, remember that if you are going to communicate with girls and their influencers, you have to think about all four of those things, because interest in and of itself is not enough. So it's interest, competence, belonging, and identity. For me, it's easy to remember ICBI. If that works for you, then great. And also then I will give you some ideas, I and Cheryl, about reaching target audiences. So slide, please. First, you have to think about which groups you want to target. This is really important because the messages that you share with those groups, with different groups, is not going to be the same message. So for example, if you're a school librarian, you may want to talk to teachers and help them to influence girls. So what the teachers care about, it's very likely to be something different than what the girls themselves care about. Or maybe you want to communicate with the parents or the principal in your school. If you're a public librarian, you probably have some youth groups coming in, but you may also need to communicate with their parents and tell them, for example, why is it so important that girls get involved? Why is diversity important? So thinking about who you're going to interact with, you may want to, they need different kinds of information. So if we could go down one slide, please. So down to the next, thank you. So one of the things to think about, especially if you're in a school library, is to think about which students can be successful. So you may, it depends on how, if you're trying to influence people to participate in a computer science class, for example, you have to think about what are the pre-existing, the prerequisite skills, knowledge, competencies to be successful in that course. But you also have to think about the influencers. And if we were doing a workshop right now, I would say, well, so let's stop and think about who are the influencers of the people that you are interested in working with. And this is going to vary depending on where you are in the country, if you're in a rural library or an urban library or a suburban library, if your main constituency is Latinas versus white kids versus African-American kids. So you really have to stop and think about who people are. So if we could go down one slide, please. So now I'm going to talk to you about crafting messages. And again, I said, if you remember nothing else, you should think about interest, confidence, belonging, and identity. We strongly encourage people to think about these 4 different issues in creating messages, and it is based in research. The underlying premise here is that we will be interested in doing something that we perceive we're good at doing, and that is consistent with our sense of our belonging in a community, our beliefs about who we can become, and our ability to do it. So, and we will be more likely to practice those things and become good at it over time. Next slide, please. So again, I've talked about targeted messaging and thinking about the specific audience and what they care about. So for some people, it's just about fun. If you are in a mother-daughter, you have mothers and daughters coming in working together, maybe it's about relationship and building relationships together. But whatever it is, you need to think about their present beliefs, values, and goals, and also consider their competing goals. So as an example of a competing goal, for kids in middle school or high school, they have elective courses. And many times a computing course is offered at the same time as, say, a language course or some other elective course that will look really good on a college application. So we have to think about what other things are getting in the way of people doing the kinds of getting involved in the computing in the economy. So here's on the right side is a bunch of things that might be more important to, say, a school principal or the parents. But it's just a set of things that you can think about and say, what are the messages that are going to be important to this audience? So now, if you go down to 1 slide, please. And then 2. So that's just really a placeholder slide. I'm going to talk about interest. So again, the underlying premise here is that we'll be interested in doing something we perceive that we're good at doing, and that we'll be more likely to practice and become good at it if we're interested in it. So interest is generated by creating expectations about the outcome of getting involved in something. We do things, we look at them, it's very tacit, but we think about the advantages and disadvantages or pros and cons of doing something. So what are we going to get out of it? But at the same time, we have to think about whether we can do it or not. So taking into account both of those things is really important. Because if you're interested, you think there's going to be a positive outcome, but you don't think that you're going to be able to do it, you're probably not going to develop interest and become more involved in something. You go down 1 slide, please. So several years ago, 12 or so years ago, 13 probably, actually more, it got started earlier than that. I had the opportunity to do a study, which I got to repeat over 3 years with more than 3,500 girls to ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? So these were middle school girls, and this was a lot of girls. I'll tell you that I really didn't know what question to ask them, but I had access to them in a special event. So I just said, what do you want to do when you grow up? Having no idea what I was going to learn. And then I categorized the data. So it was all open-ended. Some girls were silly and we had to throw out their results. But, you know, like, and especially my favorite response ever was, I don't know, I'm 11. But the most common response for middle school girls was that they wanted to work with animals in some way. And this was, you can see, excuse me, that it was a really high number of people who wrote in that they wanted to work with animals. And this is distinct from, if you look down the slide, you'll see that there's a marine biologist. I didn't know how to interpret that. That could mean swimming with dolphins, or it could mean studying amoebas. So I separate that out into a separate category. But this is, this was an extremely diverse group of girls. This was done in Denver public schools and some surrounding areas. And maybe some of you are from Denver or working in Denver right now. If so, then you realize that maybe 75 to 85% of the kids in the Denver public school area are from Latino families. So thinking, I present this to you, it might be a little bit old, although I think it's probably still consistent that being a doctor or a veterinarian or working with animals is really important to middle school girls, or something that they think they could do because they know about it. But you should think carefully about what is it that interests the girls, whether it's high school, middle school, elementary school age, now. And you could actually find out from them. You could conduct some sort of a survey. Some of you might be wondering why engineer is the fourth one down, because it would be an unexpected thing. I did this research within an engineering event, so the girls got to go to 3 different workshops that day and find out what it would mean to be an engineer, a civil engineer, and different kinds of engineering. So it's not surprising that many of them wrote they wanted to be an engineer, because now they found out, oh, here's how the water gets to my house when I'm taking a shower, and I'm really interested in that. So that was a positive finding for the group that I did this work with. So now I'm going to present to you a bunch of slides. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly to just give you some ideas. If we can go down to the next slide. So here's some ideas for appealing to kids and parents. And I'm not watching the chat, but I know that some people are throwing ideas in, and I love it. And I hope someone will compile them all. You know, if middle school girls care about the dog, well, there are computational things that help you find your dog if your dog is lost. There are many medical things that could help dogs, like 3D printed casts and things. Now, if it's more that they're interested in art, you can see Leah Beakley with her wearable computing there on her sleeve. We see also a woman who is an engineer, but she creates health robotic systems for doctors to use. Down a slide, please. Okay, you can connect with the things that they're already familiar with. Now, people my age often use Facebook to connect with our families, but kids are not necessarily using Facebook. They might have a Facebook account, but they're more likely to be using Snapchat or Instagram. So understanding what they do now and what they care about is really important. They may be using Spotify for listening to music. You might interest them by saying, how do you think Spotify makes a recommendation to you? Slide down one slide, please. They need to know that computing work is meaningful. It affects our world. It helps us to help people. Of course, not everybody is into helping other people, but a lot of people are, boys and girls. Down a slide, please. So there's computing in healthcare and education. You see there are 3D printed casts. There are doctors these days who actually have 3D printers in their offices to make casts like that. Somebody has to create those devices and the software that allows them to run. Down one, please. More about creativity and human potential. There's more wearable computing there. And some of you might be doing wearable things with your youth groups. Down one, please. You can also describe the relevance of the event that you're going to hold for other things that kids are going to do for high school, for college majors or community college or whatever they're going to go do next. Saying things like, there's no science today that does not include computer science. And that's true. There's all sorts of things that are relevant to computing, and there's a list of things there. Down another one, please. You might be interested in going to this website, .diva.org. It's a little bit old now, and I wish we could update it, but it shows a bunch of different women in different occupational or different industrial areas and different kinds of jobs that use computing. Lots of times you can work anywhere, you can contribute from anywhere, you could be a military spouse or in the military itself. We need things like cybersecurity. But there are some short videos there at .diva.org with women talking about what they do and why they like it. Down one, please. So whatever you do as you're trying to develop interest, keep in mind that the images that you use, there are messages embedded in images. So we see here two robots. One robot is saving a life, and the other one looks a little bit more sci-fi, like a toy, and that might be more appealing to a boy. If you want to show a toy robot, find a robotic dog. They're so cute, and the girls love the dogs, of course. So next, we're going to talk about confidence. If you go down a slide, please. Confidence is not a static, up one, please. I'm sorry, it is a placeholder, but I have some things to say about it. Thank you. Confidence is not static, but it's dynamic, and it changes for particular performance domains. Our beliefs about what we can do are acquired in some different ways. One, through our personal attainments, the things that we do. We start to build confidence that just sort of layers on because we did that, we tried it out, and we said, oh, I can do that. And I believe that that's one of the reasons that we have so many women declaring biology majors in college. It's because they say, oh, well, I take biology in high school. I know what it is, or at least I think I do, and I was successful at it. And the personal attainments is the most influential aspect of developing confidence or self-efficacy. The second is learning about your abilities from the viewpoint of other people. Some of you may have heard of this notion of the looking glass self. It was a phrase coined by Charles Horton Cooley many, many years ago, 70 or 80 years ago, but thinking about how we are influenced by what other people believe about us. And then a couple of other things where we acquire confidence is through social persuasion and our own physiological states and reactions. So whatever messaging that you come up with, it needs to demonstrate that you have confidence in a student and in your patron, and build her confidence that she will be successful. So I'm going to talk a little bit, if you go to the next slide, some of the things that you can do to build confidence. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of the growth mindset as opposed to the fixed mindset. So growth mindset is this belief that your abilities can grow if you only work hard. The opposite of this is the fixed mindset, which implies that you've either got it or you don't. And if you don't have it, then you're never going to get good at it. So you will have some students who are already likely to have experience, and it's important not to confuse that with intelligence. I've seen it done. I've done research where I've heard it talked about that way. You should avoid implying that you have to be a genius, and you're thinking, I'm sure, well, I would never say that, but one of the things that can happen, and in fact, you may have to tell other people to avoid this, is sometimes you hear people say things like, well, if you're good at math, and then the way kids interpret this is often through, well, you have to be really good at math. That's really different things. You might be capable at math, or it just depends on what the competencies are that you have to have in order to do this. And then as far as the growth mindset, the words that we use can create and reinforce and sustain beliefs about the fixed versus growth mindset. So intelligence praise is something like, oh, you must be really smart, you did a good job at that, as opposed to, wow, you must have worked really hard at this because you did a good job. You can see how those kinds of things are different, and it's the kind of social persuasion. It tries to teach people what it takes in order to be good at something. You go down one slide, please. I should say not to be good at it, but to get better at it. Then also you can describe how your event, or if you're teaching a class, how it might promote success. What you do to make sure that people are successful. And this is something I think people often don't do, is say, hey, look, I designed this activity. I thought about what you know to start with and how to build your knowledge throughout so that you can be successful in the end. Because a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know how to do that. And you're sort of flummoxed. You're like, well, that's what this is all about. I'm going to show you how to do it. And you can say things like, you'd be great at this. I really hope you will come. And if you think it's going to be challenging, you can say, yeah, this is going to be new to you. And you're going to have to work at it. But I think you're up to the challenge. So one down a slide, please. I'm going to go across this really quickly and then let you come back to it. But just think about the communication styles and socialization that boys and girls have. And also keep in mind that this is, that it's definitely different depending on where you are and the patrons that you're working with. But girls more than boys are often, it's okay to express your weakness and ask for help, whereas boys that you might work with are encouraged to display confidence and ability and independence and to not cry, for example, to express any kind of weakness. So the girls might come back to you with, well, I can't do that, or I don't know how to do that. And just keep in mind that they may need a little bit more encouragement. And also, if you don't encourage them, sometimes they can think that a lack of encouragement is discouragement. But sometimes they need to hear it more than once before they'll get involved. So next slide, please. And so a final thing about confidence is that we have to avoid mistaking confidence or experience for ability. So there are hundreds of studies, nearly every study that I can think of, where women underreport and men over-report their confidence. And note that these are probabilities and percentages and not truth with capital T. This is possibly related to socialization. It may be a violation of norms to present yourself as knowing a lot, as opposed to it might be a norm where you have to present yourself as very knowledgeable. So just to be thinking about what's going on there. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about belonging. So people often want to get involved in things where they feel like it's appropriate and they fit into the community. So next slide, please. You can promote belonging and inclusivity in different ways. You may have groups of people that you work with. You can bring in groups of kids, or the mother-daughter group, or whoever it is that you work with. And I'm hoping that people are throwing into chat what kinds of groups that you work with so that we can have a better understanding. Ask students to recruit their friends, and be sure that you use inclusive language and set up a welcoming physical environment, which I'm sure that you probably do. But let's go down one slide. I want to show you an unwelcoming environment. If you go down one slide, please. Right, so the environment that you are working in, this is a classroom. It has a message also. Now this classroom was designed this way on purpose because it was part of a study to see if in the physical environment of this classroom would influence women to either say that they were interested in studying computing or not. And when the environment looked like this, with the bobblehead Spock and all of these kind of sci-fi posters, they were more likely to say, no, I don't want to study computing, than when in an environment that had pictures of plants and nature and things like that. So just keeping in mind that things that we put in the environment also communicate something to people. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about identity. So when you think about education and learning, you think about becoming a certain kind of person or taking on an identity. For example, when you were in your library and information science programs, you were becoming librarians. You were taking on the identity through your education and through the activities that you were getting involved with. And you must have believed that becoming a librarian was appropriate for a person like you. Occupations are often gendered, like a nurse, or race type, so it can be hard for some people to see themselves taking on certain identities. For example, it may be hard for a lot of men to imagine becoming nurses because it's so heavily gendered female. Same with kindergarten teacher. So the messaging that you give needs to align with the identity of the target group that you are trying to persuade. Next slide, please. So some things you can do is intentionally provide role models to help build identity. You can highlight women's contributions to computing. You can connect to the community around you to provide access to role models, maybe bring in speakers if you think that your patrons are likely to come. You can show demographic similarity, and it is easier when somebody sees themselves in the images that you're showing or the people that you're showing. But it's not always required. Sometimes it's just about value systems and caring about similar things. Okay, down a slide, please. So, and a caution is showing an identity that does not fit the audience's self-perception. So that little computer programming scene that looked like a patch, so that's something, a drawing of the Iron Sheik. And this was actually something that a teacher in Florida really used to try to get students interested in his class. And after he took a class on how to recruit girls into his classes, he said, I never asked myself if the girls see themselves in the Iron Sheik. And he started changing all sorts of things. He would bring a dog and make sure everybody got to pet the puppies and stuff like that. So if we go down one, please. Now, there's people who are going to say, yeah, but I don't want to work in this field and so on. You have to think about whether you have to counter those stereotypes, like it's all for geeks, or I don't want to sit in a cubicle all day, or I don't want to be a code monkey or something like that. If you talk about it in advance, you may reinforce stereotypes. And again, once stereotypes are implanted in us, they're very difficult to dislodge. You may instead want to, if you go to the next slide, please, if someone brings it up, you could liken computing and engineering to other fields where women and minorities have been historically underrepresented, like medicine, and then show them interesting and valued contributions. So to not address underrepresentation may be like denying reality. People may bring it up, so you should be prepared. Next slide, please. So there are many ways that you can reach your audience by being visible, having posters up, showing up at local events. You have handouts you can give, and just talking to people and bringing in former participants. And that is going to conclude, my part, and I'm going to give the floor over to Cheryl Eberly from Santa Ana Public Library, because she's got lots of great ideas. And thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl, are you ready? Let me see, I think you're muted. There you go, now go. You were muted, Cheryl, go for it.
Hi, Linda. I just want to confirm that I go through to slide 47, or do I just keep talking?
I will tell you, go through slide 47.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Hello, I'm Cheryl Eberly. I'm a principal librarian for young adult and volunteer services over at Santa Ana Public Library. I've recently been promoted to the youth services supervisor for the city, and that's kind of engaging different community programs and making sure that they're accessible to the community, but I still work out of the library. This picture right here is me. I'm the person in the giant gold onesie, and I'm presenting at a Girls Know CS conference. This is something that the library put on in collaboration with the National Organization for Women in March during Women's History Month. These two young girls are presenting, they're pitching an idea they have for providing youth who are homeless access to school equipment, so like pencils and paper, and they're pitching an idea for an app. And what this shows is a way in which we could engage young girls in issues that they were very, passionate about in our community. And in our community, girls and also boys are very passionate about issues of social justice, but also really interested in ways in which they can help their community. So this was one avenue in which we could provide them that opportunity to do that. One of the big points that Leisha had mentioned was engaging interest. And engaging youth interest is really, really important. And that can go in many different forms. And what we do in Santa Ana, and for just to be clear, Santa Ana is a city in Southern California, and we have about 80% of our community is Latino. The school district, it's about 93% of the students all qualify for free and reduced meals. So it's a challenging community to live in, and for young girls especially, it's especially challenging. So having ways to engage their interest is really big, and the first thing we always do is try to see what they want, and a lot of times it's really not just helping themselves, but really helping their community, being civically engaged, or having other interests like art or music, being engaged. But a lot of it comes back to their community. So when we put on an event like this Girls No CS conference, it was a chance for young girls to meet other girls who cared about their community, but also gave them a chance to think about ways in which they could help. Part of the Girls No CS conference is we had a panel of 5 different speakers of ladies from different ages who were in different stages of their computer science careers. We had a woman who worked for Zillow. We had another woman who originally was in computer science but had, a really bad experience with sexual harassment, left the field completely, but now has come back to it to work on an app to combat sexual harassment. And then we had a young girl who had just graduated and is working as an engineer, a girl who is in college, and also a girl who was in high school who was an Aspirations in Computing winner who had put on a coding class in the Santa Ana Public Library. All in all, we had about 80 girls, and it was just a neat way to engage girls' interests. Not every girl that came there was a girl that was going into computer science, but it was a girl that was interested in learning about it and interested in, meeting other women. And you could see definitely their confidence coming up as they were able to kind of brainstorm these kinds of app ideas. We also had a young girl from Microsoft who brought in a VR machine, because Microsoft will do that. They bring in the VR machine, and the girls were able to do VR, and she talked about being on the merchandising end of, CS. Next slide, please. One of the ways in which we engage our youth interests is always connecting back to their community and connecting them to different sorts of mentors. And part of that is really part of engaging the community together with the youth. Right here you can see there's a picture of a group of people, young people they got blue jackets on. And there's a young girl that's talking to them. That group right there is a local group that's part of the Achievement Institute of Scientific Studies, and it's a community nonprofit that engages youth in really, really intensive work where they learn about different scientific fields like medical science, engineering, and they pair them with internships in these local businesses that are huge, these local bioengineering businesses, local pharmaceutical industries, and these are high school students. It's a 2-year program. They reached out to us at the library, and they were thinking of ways in which they could kind of partner with us. And what we did for them was we provided them with a scholarship writing workshop. The young girl that is leading the scholarship writing workshop, her name is Aura Carrillo, and she was a library kid when she was 12. She came in, and she's now a junior high teacher. She was a Gates Millennium Scholar, and that she applied for as part of our library program, and she continues to run our scholarship club. So that was a creative partnership we did with a local community group that's already doing science. So there's a lot of questions amongst, I was watching in the chat that you were talking about, there's these other STEM clubs, these other computer science, these other coding clubs. This was one way in which we partnered with them and offered a service to that group that the library was good at, which was our scholarship program. And now we also have this great partnership with these kids that they will come in and they will do some science programs for our kids in return. So it's kind of like a full circle sort of thing. The group below, if you see that, that's another group. They were students from, I believe, UCLA in the electrical engineering group that we partnered with, who came to the library and did just a one-time program in electrical engineering and taught kids lots of different sorts of, science programs and taught them about computational thinking. And that's one way in which, if you're strapped with resources, really partnering with university groups or partnering with local groups that are doing it and sharing talents is a really great way in which you can kind of maximize your resources and reach, but also generate interest and confidence and, give kids that sense of belonging. But also it's really great for kids to see themselves reflected in others who are in STEM, and that's a big build on identity. We expanded on our hackathon idea, and in June we did a hackathon program at the library, and it brought in as many people as possible to come in to tackle social issues through technology. We had them first, just like in the Girls Know conference, we had them look at four issues: food insecurity, homelessness, health, and community sustainability. And they didn't have to do the app then and there. They just had to brainstorm different sorts of ways in which, simple ideas of what they could do. Someone came in with, a food spoilage, when does food spoil app? Or someone else came in with, if there's a way in which grocery stores could let people know that, oh, we're going to be throwing out these foods are expiring, we're going to be having to get rid of them, but they're not really expired, they're still used for the community. So simple things like that, the kids could just kind of think about. And then the next step was actually building the app, and we've had people come in and help and work on that and see that part. But this way, it allows people to think computationally, but also really empowers them and then brings them into real solutions and real ways in which they can connect to their community. Next slide. One of the best programs we've had and best partnerships we've had that's come out of our library worked with Ready to Code, was one of the Ready to Code sites, and we had this whole thing on Girls Know CS and working with different organizations. And one of the best ones we had was with NCWIT, National, I know it stands for something. I'm not going to say it because I'll get it wrong. But basically, it's a national organization for women in information technology, and it's really cool. When we first started our coding programs, we really didn't have that many coders. Our program was mostly computer science, computational thinking. And we included that in computational thinking and cooking, the coding and knitting, and coding and music, just computational thinking and all these different things that kids like. We started getting youth from UCI. The first one was this young girl from actually a neighboring community, Irvine, which is a very different community to Santa Ana. It's different population, much more wealthier sort of community. And she had gotten an Aspirations in Computing award to run a program, and she had selected Santa Ana. And so she did I think it was a 6-8 week program that she had partnered with UCI students. And then after that, we got another young girl who had won this, Aspirations in Computing award and wanted to do a program in Santa Ana. So then I started getting really interested, and I wanted to know, were there any local Santa Ana girls who had, won this award, who could do these programs in Santa Ana? Because it's really important for our kids, and this goes back to the issue of identity, for young girls who are to be encouraged to go into fields like STEM and to be encouraged to go into fields like computer science, to be able to see themselves reflected in the leaders and the mentors for that program. What we found out was there has never been a Santa Ana girl apply for this program, for this scholarship, for this award. And I thought, okay, let's try to change this. So this week, we did the award came out, the scholarship, the announcement for the application came out. And last Saturday, we did an aspirations in computing kind of information session. But really, we had it be an information session where young girls could meet tecnologicas, which are Latinos in the field, and just find out about computer science, find out about what it entails. We had one girl attend this event. She was encouraged to attend by both her grandmother and her great-grandmother, who called her in that morning. And, for us, that's a win, because if that one girl, and she's very interested in applying, and we're going to be having application sessions through November. So we know how it works. One girl and then another girl comes in, and then we just help them with the application sessions. And that one girl applies and she gets it. It's a win, So, but that's what we're continuing to do. And that highlights a really important part, which is engaging parents, engaging the family. If you're working specifically with high Latino family, Latino population, it's really important to engage the family on behalf of the young girls, because to let them know what computer science is, what the opportunities are. For us in Santa Ana, it's really important for a lot of the families want the young girls to not leave home and go so far away, letting the people know that, close by within the geographical vicinity, there's lots of, companies that are computer science, advanced manufacturing companies that, that their daughters could work in. Is really important, letting them know what the pay is. A lot of the young girls that we've had that come into our Girls Who Code program or other coding programs, it's always someone that's helped them. And that's also part of the community engagement. So it's not just engaging the families, you got to get the word out there in the community. We've had several mentors contact us, aunts, uncles, family friends that will bring the kids over. So it's sort of a kind of a whole wraparound, all the networks that can encourage and support a young girl going, towards this field. Just to kind of briefly give you the aspirations.org, it's a really cool award. It's a really cool program. You can win an affiliate award. You can teach them, and they get national award. They can win a collegiate award. There's just a lot of opportunities when the girls start finding out that they can get scholarships, and it opens up their doors for them. It's really important. And it's also important for us, we help the girls work on their scholarships. We support them. We provide actual sessions for them to write, because you have to the library is a great partner in providing that support and that piece of the community that will help them to the next stage. I know we're running short of time, so I'm going to stop right there. I believe I'm supposed to stop right there.
Thank you. You are supposed to stop right there. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And lots of information. Now, there's one question that came up that I think was answered about careers in CT and CS and all of that. So I think that's really good. I was just wondering if Lucia or Cheryl, in the 2 minutes we have left, there was a question about pushback when you do something specifically for girls in the library, through the library. And I know this has come up a lot. So any tips that anyone has about, we're doing a girl specific program and other people say, wait, how come boys can't come? Any thoughts about how to send the message, how to articulate the value of what you're doing when it's focused just on girls at that moment? Anybody?
Yeah, I can answer to that, because we've had that. What I usually tell them is I pull out the stats, how girls are really underrepresented in the field of computer science, how there is a big demand for young girls in computer science. I also do have programs that are open to boys, that are all, we tell them, we've got the Code of Gaming, we've got lots of other programs that's open to everybody. but I let them know that this is the deficit in the industry. The industry has a deficit of women, and especially women of color, in the field. So I let them know, hey, we've got a deficit here. We've got a lot of girls here that need to learn it. So we're just meeting a need, and at the end of the day, the whole community is going to benefit.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you.
Yeah, this comes up a lot with the Aspire IT programs, and a lot of times it's tied to Title IX, which allows affirmative action actually to overcome the effects of conditions which resulted in limited participation therein by persons of a particular sex. So we can certainly document the gender disparity in tech, so therefore there's an exception to Title IX. I can put that language in the chat too, if that's helpful.
That would be great. Yeah, that's awesome. And then I can also put it in the blog post and other places where all of this will be. So thank you all. I know we're just a little bit over time. I wanted to point out that there's lots of information here about all the great resources that NC WIT provides and the kinds of things that Cheryl was talking about. I will be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to the chat transcript, the video, the evaluation, and anything you need or have questions about, you can reply to that. If you need a certificate of attendance, you just need to let me know you need that, and I will send you that. And I think that's a wrap for this great session. Thank you so much, Licia and Cheryl and Jenny, for being here today, and for everyone else. Lots of great information, and look forward to seeing you next month when we're going to be talking about equity of access, and particularly the impact that fines and fees have on various communities that we serve. So thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and hope the weather is not too rainy where you are. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.